All right, well, welcome everyone to MVP Office Hours for this January 6th date. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you all had great holidays. We are joined today by Dale Ziegler. I'm Jackie Travieso. Jared Kingston was not able to join us today, so we'll catch his voice on the next recording. On our opening slide here, for those of you who are new, we have a list of events that we've been collecting as they've been published. So if these events are new to you or you hadn't heard the announcement about these events, they're worth noting and checking out. And then for additional Salesforce sponsored or Salesforce run events, you can always go to salesforce.com/events for all the latest and greatest announcements there as well. So for those of you who are new, this is an open discussion, open Q&A discussion. We meet the first and third Friday of the month. There is never a question that is too big or too small or too elementary. We welcome all questions. We have a special guest generally who join us each call to maybe focus on certain topics so that we can make sure that we can hit a broad audience, different types of questions in different areas of the use of Salesforce. We are recording today's call and we'll post this both on community and on Twitter for your listening pleasure at a later date as well. If you have not had a chance, if you could please go ahead and put yourself on mute so we can minimize background noise. That would be fantastic. To ask a question, simply use the raise your hand feature in your chat window there. And then when you are either asking or answering or commenting on a question, if you could announce yourself so we can get familiar with voices and names, that would be fantastic. So today's special guest is Brendan Conroy. Brendan is a senior sales consultant with Monday Call. He's 5 times certified in all of these different areas: admin, advanced, Sales Cloud consultant, Service Cloud, and app builder. One of the things that Brendan brings to us today that we have not had in the past that I can recall is his area of expertise in studying for the admin 201 and 211 and passing those certifications. So this will be a great time to ask questions around how to prepare for those certs. He also brings with him a lot of knowledge around Professional Edition. And so for those of you who use Professional Edition, we always run up against limitations and sometimes stumbling blocks until we find creative ways to work around those shortcomings or limitations. So we've got a chance to ask Brendan about these types of workarounds and suggestions. So you can follow Brendan on Twitter. His Twitter handle is listed there. And Brendan, if you'd like to say a quick hello before we get started, that'd be great.
Hi, everyone. Let's have some fun.
Let's have some fun. All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. And as we go through and talk about ideas and suggestions and resources, we're going to try and capture those in one of these slides for you, so you've got those listed out as well. So if we can just take kind of a quick audience participation poll, and by a show of hands, first of all, before I ask these 2 questions, how many of you are new, first-timers to MVP Office Hours? How many of you this is your first time in? Ooh, good. We've got, looks like we've got at least 3 new people. Fantastic, great. Thank you so much for joining us. Glad to have you. Okay, so the next question, out of curiosity, is how many of you are PE or Professional Edition users? Use your virtual hand to let us know. We're curious about our audience today. Looks like there's just a couple, so that's good. Hopefully we can get some questions answered around Professional Edition. And then how many of you are interested in becoming certified, either your first certification or a subsequent certification? Aha, and the board just went yellow, so looks like we've got a lot of interest there as well, Brendan. So good, we've got the right audience, we've got the right special guest, and hopefully we can share a lot of knowledge. We also have a couple other MVPs on the line as well who, let's see, if I can just quickly rattle off their names. Brian Kwong is with us, and I guess that's it. If I miss anybody, let me know. I want to make sure that I give you shout-outs. We appreciate all of our MVPs joining us to either ask questions or answer questions. So let's go ahead and let's start off and take some questions. So the floor is yours. If you have a question, go ahead and use the raise your hand in the virtual chat. And let's start with Alicia Harris. Alicia, go ahead and ask your question. It looks like we're getting a lot of background noise, so let me see if we can mute some. I'm not able to tell whose background noise that is. So if you guys could just put yourselves on mute, that'd be great. Okay, there we go. Fantastic. Okay, it looks like Alicia did not have a question. That was a leftover hand raise from our polls. So please don't be shy. Let's go ahead and kick this off and ask Brendan a question. Chandler, go ahead.
Hello. So can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. All right. So I am in a situation where I'm needing to create documentation for my org. And I am basically just trying to figure out, it's kind of, documenting the Salesforce org can be complicated because, there's a lot of different business processes and people that are usually put into the org by administrator and developers. But also, there's specific business processes of people actually using it, then the admin stuff, and then that's kind of split between customizations and things that are sort of standard functionality. So I'm sort of in a position where I'm leaving a company and they need to know, all right, so if we need Salesforce questions, where do we go? And I'm hesitating to say just go onto the Salesforce documentation online because I have a lot of customizations in it. So I'm kind of just wondering, from your guys' experience, how have you guys documented Salesforce and what kind of resources you guys have utilized, and also maybe tools for just reviewing your org and building documentation you've used to just have a really great way of summarizing the org and making it so other people can, build knowledge base for other people to use.
Yep, I've actually done this in two separate ways. The first would be if I wanted to make essentially a design doc, take a Word document and type everything out. You can always put it as a chatter file and then have various versions of it. So if there are changes, you can just add to it so that you have a running document. The other is to essentially, I use something called Jing, J-I-N-G, which does screen grabs, and it also allows you to do videos up to 5 minutes. So you can either have it as documentation, or in my case, I like to just make quick videos about different topics, create them into little links, and post them in the org so that folks, if they have a specific question, can just watch the video or see the documentation.
Yeah, that sounds good. Give me 1 second. All right, well, so you guys have just put all your documentation into Salesforce proper. You haven't used another database or something, or used Knowledge? Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
You can certainly use Knowledge for that because that would be that would be in line with the regular logic of Knowledge. I've always created a custom object personally.
Okay.
But yeah. So I've always had it in Salesforce proper so that people have a central repository as opposed to a Dropbox or, in a worst case scenario, on somebody's computer, because I would want it to be shared to the people without that much difficulty and then trying to find it.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, we're basically going to put them all in a Google Drive and have just a directory on there to do it. But, I mean, even just creating custom objects is not something I've thought of. I kind of just been like, I guess I'd use Salesforce Knowledge to do it. But the licensing cost for Salesforce Knowledge isn't something they're going to invest in right away. So that's a good suggestion, do it in custom objects.
Yep.
Brendan, have you tried to use Notes at all in Lightning?
I haven't. No.
No.
In my case with Notes, just because I've done a lot of client work where they're bringing over notes from external systems and stuff like that, it can be kind of a pain to do so. Most of the time I personally stay away from notes unless it's just like stuff I have to do kind of thing. But I'm sure that other people have different ways of doing things.
One of the resources that I recently discovered, this is Jackie by the way, that I discovered at Dreamforce this year is a new product called Elements.cloud for documenting your processes. So think of Visio, but way cooler, much easier, and the processes can stack one on top of another, so you can reference them. And here's the biggie: right now, it's free, or a portion of it is free, and then you can invite your users to collaborate in the tool at the same time. So you no longer have to do a shared document. You can do it all right in there, and you can upgrade and then have this actually sit right inside Salesforce.
You know, that's
Elements
really cool you mentioned that, because I actually have heard about Elements too, and it'd be cool to hear how people and see examples of people using it.
Elements, yes, it's definitely a good tool. We've started tinkering around with it in our group, but I think from a pricing standpoint, once you go non-free, I think you're paying based on the number of licenses in the org, regardless of how many would actually be accessing it. But I could be wrong. So if you can go free as much as possible, obviously you'd want to.
Yes, and then they're getting ready to launch something else. I don't know what they're calling it, but you can probably follow them on Twitter to find out. But it's to actually document your org with a click of a button kind of a thing.
I've heard about, I feel like that's like how I stumbled upon it, was I heard about that thing, and then I didn't really see, wasn't really clear where it was in the back end for Elements Cloud, but if it's a coming feature, then that would explain it. I'll have to do more research.
Yeah, I think it's in beta right now.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. And is there something that pops to mind? Like, I can look it up, but is there something that pops to mind that makes it the paid version? That's the paid version versus the free version, like what it offers?
It's a pretty clear demarc once you get into it. But Richard and Ian Gotts is the main contact you'll see probably in the success community. They are more than excited to take the moment to talk to you about the free one and what the add-ons will be. They love the product and they're really engaged. So if you reached out via Success, that you'd get a call within minutes probably. Maybe not
cool.
minutes. They're in Ian's in San Francisco and Richard's in the UK, but they are really fired up about their product. They're fired up about the topic in general. They'd be happy to tell you about how they got where they were there, and they'll tell you the roadmap. They'll tell you about why you might want to pay versus not pay. They're even okay with people not paying and using the tool to the best of their ability without they're not very pushy. So I highly recommend just reaching out. He'll ring you.
Okay, cool. I'll definitely look into that. That's great advice.
And they've got great customer service as well. So if you're stumped on something, there's a chat feature right in it, and Ian is constantly out there answering questions.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions. All right, anybody else have a question? Christina Rodriguez.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. I just wanted to piggyback off of this topic. Is it safe to say that when you mentioned there's the ability to make a custom object, it could potentially, in a basic way, replace having to purchase knowledge? Can we do kind of like what knowledge does, but through a custom object? Because I'm looking for similar functionality, but more of a way to post questions and post answers to the questions. Because currently I'm just doing it in a chatter group, but it's not very functional, especially if there's too many posts and documents. So I'm looking for a cleaner look without having to purchase knowledge, just because it's too expensive for our organization.
I think it's one of those things that you technically could do if you're just creating custom objects that essentially say this is the title of it, this is the body of it, but knowledge has a lot of functionalities that would require like triggers, like the ability to schedule out publishing dates, if you want some specific things to happen with approval processes, some out-of-the-box stuff with knowledge. So I think to your question, I think you technically could, but I think you'd also be sort of limiting yourself or creating a lot of potential work in order to ultimately create that. And to the question and answer side, there's, as of, I believe it's either this release or last release, Chatter Answers became invalidated, so now they're going on to Chatter Questions. So if I'm asking a question, whether I'm in, yep, go ahead, sorry.
I think that was background noise.
Okay, no worries. So if I'm an internal person or an external person within a community, I can ask questions via Chatter as opposed to the former construct of having the tab of Q&A itself. So I think that those are two separate concepts. And I guess just to extend the question, I think it would be difficult to create a question and answers series of custom objects without some custom development. I think it could technically be done, but you're also losing out on out-of-the-box functionality that's coming with the new Chatter Questions.
Understood. I'm just trying to find a solution for a small organization because I know that knowledge isn't an option.
Okay. Yeah. So
well,
if it is, yep, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Finish, Brent. You can finish up. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if it is just simply, I want to put an FAQ for how to process an opportunity, just for the sake of argument. Here's the steps to do it as part of a text field. I think that's absolutely suitable, and you can have security based on that. And I think that that's where it essentially ends. You just have the list of quote-unquote articles that have the data in it, but it just would be that exclusive. And you'd have to do any kind of, if you want to configure it any further, you'd have to just do it manually.
Perfect.
And this is Dale. What I was just going to say on top of that, and Brendan, you said it, is how much power, how much juice do you really need? Because, I mean, knowledge does come with a lot of really cool stuff and capabilities attached to it. But if you don't need all of what knowledge brings and you're not able to pay the cost, then, yeah, scale it down, trim it down to something custom that does fit within the realm of both cost and need.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if you move to knowledge subsequently, I can't think of an issue of essentially just mass importing any existing, I'll call them quote-unquote articles into knowledge itself, taking it from the custom object to a knowledge proper if at a certain point you grow and decide that all the functionality of knowledge would be helpful.
Got it. Thank you.
Of course.
Also, I actually had something to add too, like Chandler again. So I've played around. So I'm going to a new company that does have knowledge, and I have a situation where I'm like, okay, well, my own company doesn't need knowledge, but my new company does. I'm developing documentation either way, and I built knowledge. And really, I mean, basically, the rich text field in an article is really where you're going to put your stuff. You're just putting in a rich text field into an article to just have that article in the system. And, of course, you got all the advanced stuff from knowledge, but, I mean, any custom object you make, you just put a rich text field in. You could build, like, it's all HTML enabled. You just build whatever you want in there, and then, you can, just have that show up on a page layout, and that would functionally be what a knowledge article is, except for basically the integration into cases and article management stuff. That's fancy. So I do think, if you just made a custom object, if all you want is somebody able to search for text and it come up in a little object so they can read it, then it's actually pretty easy just to put that in a custom object.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
And Chandler, one of the things that we did not mention when you were asking about documentation, Brian Kwong noted this in the little chat window over here. It says, description fields are your friend. So make sure that we're using those to document why we have the field, what is it connected to. I always make reference to, in my descriptions, if that particular field is used in a Visualforce page or if it's used in Workflow or Process Builder, just so that I've got kind of a heads up that I can't really make much changes to many changes to this without really investigating what is it linked to.
And an additional thing that a custom object would get you with documentation is a URL field for you to actually drop a link to the specific entity. Because even fields have their own unique IDs that you could build into a URL that here's the field, here's what it does, and oh, by the way, here's a link to actually get to that on the back end. So you're minimizing the number of searches that somebody might have to do to get to that thing as you build out your documentation.
Good point.
Metadata,
Right.
that was the word I was looking for, metadata.
Yeah. Any other questions around documentation or process? Okay, I'm sure you have some burning questions around certification if you'd like to start asking those. And if not, I'll go ahead and kick it off with Brendan. Do you have any resources that you find valuable as a supplement to release notes and the published study guide that's posted by Salesforce?
The most effective way that I've found in studying for certification, there's a group called the Salesforce Certification Study Group. It's actually one that I'm a session leader on now, but when I was getting my first certification of ADM 201, it was incredibly helpful for us because it's essentially a 15-week course that's put on by MVPs mostly, where we go through topics that would be covered on the test, and people have developer orgs, and we give them homework. So if you want to make a B2B or a B2C process using record types, so we have them build it out, and then every week we go over the homework, talk about limitations to be aware of, talk about errors that people have made in their homework, but it's really about getting the hands-on experience with it, and I think that's by far the most powerful thing. So whether you're using a group like that or using Trailhead, which is also a very, very good resource for getting essentially hands-on training, I think that those are the main aspects of getting certified. I'm guessing that the majority of folks would be interested in ADM 201, and I like to think of that test as essentially you have to know a little bit about everything, a little bit about Service Cloud, a little bit about Sales Cloud, a little bit about communities, a little bit about Chatter. So you just have to be familiar with with some of the functionality. And the best way, from my perspective, to get familiar is to actually have hands-on training in one way or another, whether it's Trailhead or even just going into a developer org on your own and just playing with different functionality, whether it's leads, campaigns, opportunities, but just becoming familiar, because those kinds of things will come up on exams. And the exams are phrased in very specific ways. Some of the questions are tailored in ways that would make you think one way if you haven't had the actual hands-on experience. An example would be a question like the answer being enable asset sync. With quotes, you have the ability to sync across to opportunities, but in the answer on the exam, it might say something like asset sync, which sounds like it's legitimate, but it actually isn't. That concept doesn't exist. And the only way that I've found effective to know if something like that sounds like it potentially could be a legitimate function in Salesforce is to just have that hands-on training so I can envision it in my mind's eye of, hey, wait a second, quotes are the ones that sync, not assets. So I think that going into one's dev org and potentially having support, whether it's in the community or from Salesforce itself, because they even have trainings for the exams, but just having that real hands-on training is very, very important. Additionally, at Dreamforce, something that I do probably 5 or 6 of every year are called hands-on hot sessions, hands-on trainings, where they give you a developer org, and it might be for Pardot, it might be for Wave, it could be for a very specific thing. So those are good ways of getting more familiar with things that you're not that familiar with. So like last year I did, or this last year I did a few on Wave and a few on Pardot because I wanted to learn more about it. So there are a few ways of enhancing your skills. And just from a personal standpoint, when I got certified, I felt like I was on top of the world and was able to go into my boss's office and essentially request a raise. So it's something that can be very, very valuable once you have it as well.
And this is Dale. I'll add on to that with the specificity of the actual exams. It's not just the hands-on of knowing how like quotes and price books and things like that function, how they may or may not actually function. Take your time to read every single question and every single answer option word for word, because they will throw in gotchas. You may, and then also just totally understanding the syntactical things. What are the actual elements, your glossary, that's what I'm going for. Know what a tab versus an object is and is not, or an app versus tabs. Know the differences, the relationships, all of those, because they will sprinkle some questions in there that may lead you down one path and you're fairly confident, and then you have to actually stop and pull back and say, whoa, no, hold on, they were actually asking about this. And it completely changes your mindset. So read every question, read how it's phrased, read, I mean, even going back to, junior high English of subject, verb, object, they will sprinkle gotchas in there. So make sure you read those questions and know what they're asking.
And just to add on to what I was saying earlier about essentially knowing a little bit about everything, in my case, prior to getting certified, I was in Professional Edition exclusively. But for the fact of me going to the certification study group, I never had experience with workflow. I didn't know the concept of a trigger. I didn't know the concept of profiles and private models. So if you are, say, in a nonprofit, if you are just using Sales Cloud for your current job, you should go into DevOrs and just try things that you're not familiar with, because they will in all probability come up on the exam.
If I could add one more thing onto what Dale was saying too, the multiple choice questions, sometimes the answers tell you more about the answer than the question. Very often when I've taken the exam, the best advice I had was answer each question if it's true or false and why by the answers, because sometimes that rewording or that unique kind of multiple choice gotcha, if you say A is not right because of this, not just say it's not right, sometimes it explains to you what you were mistaken in the question itself. It makes it a much longer exam, but boy, you'll save yourself at least one take if you make sure you know why the falses are false and the trues are true.
And in my case, whenever I do any of the exams, if I have any doubt of my answer whatsoever, I just check it for review later. Because once you essentially, if you don't check that little box at the very end of the exam, there's a list of, say, 60 questions, and there's a little asterisk next to the ones that you have marked for review. So if I didn't mark one of them that I wasn't 100% sure about, it would just come up as essentially, I knew that this was correct, and I'm just going to focus on these other ones that I had questions about. So typically, there's more than enough time, at least in my experience, there's been more than enough time to go back and look at questions multiple times, essentially have one pass through where, in my case, I'd be marking, say, 41 out of 60 questions, then have a second pass through. It might go down to 10 at that point, and then which would be the most difficult, and then completing the test ultimately. But it is, at least in my experience, a suitable amount of time for you to go through questions multiple times. Because sometimes, say on question 2, I might answer something, and then on question 48, it reminds me of something that related to question 2. So I'd be glad that I marked it for review later so that I could change my answer based on the thing that I remembered. Cool. So were there any questions on the certification itself?
I have a question. If anybody completely understands which certifications get retired and when and how and why and all of that.
I actually don't. I know that the Dev 401 became an app builder. I think it has something to do with how they want to essentially classify folks. So originally Dev 401, people had to correct people saying that I'm Dev 401 certified, but I'm not a coder kind of thing. So I think that they separated those out so that they have the point-and-click folks, like myself, because I don't code, but I have App Builder, versus the folks who actually know how to code. But I don't know if there's a warning way ahead of time that the naming conventions are going to change, or if the paths are going to change.
Brendan, is there any kind of any method to the sequence in which you have studied for and taken your certifications? Is there any logic to the order that you decided to sit for them?
In terms of which certifications to take first, or in terms of how I study for different topics?
Well, let's do both. Let's talk about. I mean, obviously, we probably all start with the 201, but then from there, what's your logic?
In my case, I went ADM 201 to Service Cloud, Sales Cloud Consultant, because when I got ADM 201, I was a single admin. Then I went into consulting. So another pro for getting certifications is if you have more certifications, you're bound to get other jobs, and there are some jobs that have requirements. So I started with ADM 201, went to Sales Cloud Consultant because I needed to. Then subsequently I needed to get Service Cloud Consultant. And I really just got App Builder for the fun of it and Advanced Admin for the fun of it. So some firms would require, say, ADM 201, Advanced Admin, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud Consultant just as entry points, and some might just have ADM 201 as the entry point. So it just depends on the kind of jobs that you're looking for. I know in the case of the consulting, at least with Monday Call where I am, if someone doesn't have at least ADM 201, they're essentially X'd from consideration. So it just depends on the jobs that you're going for, from my perspective.
Well, and also just to add on to that, having just started in the consulting side, there is partner scoring essentially based on what certifications that partners' resources have.
Yep, totally. And with and the other one I believe was about studying. I guess it just goes back to what I was saying earlier. I just go hands-on training with essentially the study guide in hand. I go, say for the Sales Cloud Consultant, which is a totally different one. I would see a thing on territory management. So I would spend an hour just playing with territory management, getting an idea of the functionality, seeing if there's any weirdness behind it, if there's any limitations, then move on to, say, multi-currency. So it just depends on the exam that you're taking and what's reflected on the study guide.
Okay, great. Does any of our audience members have any questions around certification or anything else? Doesn't look like we have any. How about while everyone's thinking, let's talk about PE and some of the limitations or workarounds. Is there anything that you have like a go-to list when you approach a PE org that you say, okay, we need to do these 3 things?
The main things that I do, and this is as of a few releases ago, since Salesforce allowed profiles and process builder into PE, because previously you could have no real restriction on if people could delete things, if something happens, something else subsequently happens. So just as like a best practice, I like to have 2 profiles, and this is even in enterprise most of the time. One would be a clone of the standard user, because in case you guys don't know, with standard users, you're able to delete accounts, and the problem with that is called cascade deleting. So if I delete an account, any associated opportunities, cases, contacts, tasks, notes, all go with it automatically, and accidents happen. And there's no way to essentially say, if a record is deleted, email someone because that's a bad thing. So what I do is I call it the failed user. I make a clone of the standard user and just remove all delete permissions from that user so that there isn't a potential X factor. And the only exception I'm thinking about it would be on leads, because sometimes people want to merge leads. So I remove deletion from that profile except for lead. And then the second one that I do is called executive. So it's essentially a system admin profile clone minus delete. So same logic, but it gives full access to the system to folks who should have access to all reporting, all functionality, but we don't necessarily want them to delete records. It could be a CTO or something that isn't necessarily familiar with Salesforce. So those are the 2 main ones that I use in terms of profiles. In terms of automation, I think the most common one would be upon closed won opportunities. And there could be all kinds of variations on this, but a common one would be if an opportunity is closed won, send an email to X people, whether it's a group or a specific role, say SVP of sales, CEO, those kinds of things. So send them an email, do an update on the account to turn it into a customer, turn type 2 customer. So those are the 2 main things that can happen within one process builder. But it just depends on the org that you have. If you want to, say, create an invoice record automatically upon closed won, that's certainly something you could do. Create a renewal that has the close date a year out. That's also something you could do. So it just depends on the org itself. But you can use Process Builder for that, and you have up to 5 per PE. So I would suggest making sure that if you're creating a new Process Builder, that it's one that you think will scale over time, because you're using one of 5 while you're in Professional Edition.
Very good recommendations. Go ahead.
And it's Chandler again. So basically, with Process Builder, now you can actually do like multiple steps or like multiple levels of criteria, which I would definitely use that if you're, just have like an opportunity updated, flow or process, and then just within that you have criteria of if won, then do whatever. And I think if you need like only a few automations, I think that Process Builder implementation is great. You can just have 5 triggers there, and that can let you do a lot. But then if you need more than that, like it still costs money, and it's an external service, but Zapier or Workato, those kinds of like sort of middleman, if this and that types of services, you can leverage that because they have capability with Professional Edition. You can leverage those types of services to do automation if you need to. If you really are stuck, if you only have budget in your company to have Professional Edition because the number of licenses would just be too expensive at the scale that you need, like as far as volume of licenses, then if you just have one Workato license or one Zapier license, you could do a lot of automation. It just happens outside the system, but it still connects to Salesforce and can do things on other platforms too. So that was just some thoughts I had on that.
And I actually did think of
That's
one
called,
other. Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, you said it was Ricato, R-I-C-A-T-O?
WORKATO.
Oh, Ricato. Okay. I was hearing you wrong. Gotcha.
I mean, Workato, tomato.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No problem.
And another workaround I've thought of in Enterprise Edition, there are what are called dynamic dashboards. So say if I had an overall let's say if I had a dashboard that shows pipeline and closed won for the sake of argument, and I wanted to show just individual sales reps. So say if I'm a sales rep and I go to that dashboard, it only shows my records. You can't do that in Professional Edition. However, a workaround to that would be, let's say I wanted to show my pipeline. You can create a report showing my pipeline as the filter and create it as a custom link. So just take the URL of that report, create a custom link, like a custom homepage link, and then you can throw it onto the homepage. So for some of my Professional Edition clients, I would just make individual links, my pipeline, my closed won, my task for the quarter, those kinds of things, and just make them as individual custom links and then throw them on the homepage so that they could just click into the link and it would show their individual records as opposed to Enterprise, which has the dynamic dashboard functionality.
Very cool. All right, any other questions?
Yep.
Brendan, have you migrated any of your PE clients to Lightning Experience?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
It's just a personal preference on my side that I'm still waiting for the end-to-end process for Lightning to be 100% down. I think it works. This is entirely just my opinion. I think it works fine from like an opportunity standpoint, but when I get into actual client orgs and they tell me about how they want to do specific customizations, like having a DocuSign or having multiple line items on a product and having schedules and stuff like that, vast majority of the time I've suggested against Lightning for their use cases because just due to known limitations within Lightning. I know that with new orgs, it's automatically coming out with Lightning, so I essentially make the decision of should they be going with Lightning, whether it's in Professional or Enterprise, depending on their individual use case, and if I think it's going to run into scaling issues with the limitations.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because I think if you have a very simple org, then it's fine, but when you have any kind of real customization, that's where it gets a little bit crunchy from my perspective.
Okay. I'm going to put Brian Kwong on the spot for a second if he doesn't mind, because I know he works a lot with PE as well. Brian, are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Have you migrated any of your PE clients over to Lightning, and can you share any of your experiences?
We've tried. So we haven't actually had anyone successfully moved over because a lot of the things that you do in PE to kind of get away from some of the things you just can't do or haven't been able to traditionally do because you don't have the enterprise controls aren't supported in Lightning. So we have a lot of customers who created some fancy URL hacks because that's kind of what their workflow required of them.
Right.
And it's really difficult to migrate people away from a URL hack that they've been using for years and change the process completely. And most of the folks who are they're PE, they're small companies. They don't have a whole lot of time and budget, and so they're not really willing to put the investment time up front on the idea that, we're going to, just so we can move to Lightning. To them, there's not a whole lot of benefit to the Lightning platform at this time to make the effort. I will tell you, when we're implementing new customers that come to us with a professional edition, we try to start them on Lightning immediately. And the only reasons why we will move off is if because they have decided they wanted to use some other functionality that just isn't Lightning ready. So like we have some folks who are going to be using cases heavily, and while you can access cases in Lightning, you can't use the traditional closed case page layout. And so from a workflow standpoint, that can cause some trouble. Or if they have other integrations, there's a lot of those integrations are just not Lightning friendly. Even the ones that are sometimes are stamped Lightning ready aren't really Lightning ready, in the sense that it works smoothly and compared to what you can do in Classic. So I think we have something like 15 or so professional edition users or additional orgs out there. I don't think any one of them has moved to Lightning at all. And I don't think there's any plans to doing that until maybe 2018.
Okay, good to know.
And that's a great point, too, with essentially like third-party apps. I remember I was trying to get a client to go to Lightning, but they had a Jira integration. So the current construct was that they had a JavaScript hack in order to do that. And so we did all the process in order to make it essentially a Visualforce page. Obviously, we're going into enterprise at that level, but we turned it into a Visualforce page. Everything was said and done, and then it ran into another limitation that we just weren't aware of within Lightning. So that's one big consideration when considering Lightning, is if you have any integrations, as Brian said, but also any third-party apps, that you need to make sure that the end-to-end process will work.
Very cool. So it looks like we've got about 12 minutes left on this call, and I just want to give everyone another opportunity. If you have thought of any other questions, please do not be shy. And like I said at the beginning of this call, there's no question that is too elementary or too small. We welcome all questions. Christina's got a question. Thank you, Christina. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. This is a pretty basic question, I think, but I still don't understand. We have somewhat of a high turnover, and we tend to create users inside of Salesforce, but then we have to inactivate them. And I was wondering if there's a way where if and when somebody's searching for a name, let's say we hired 2 Anns, we want only the Ann that is active to pop up under people, but any Ann that has ever worked for the company keeps on popping up when we search inside of the global search.
When you search inside the global search, it's going to bring up everybody. Because once you create a user, it's going to be there forever. So that's why occasionally I'll go into a client's org and see like a test user, because they just didn't know that it was going to be created, that they couldn't delete it subsequently. In order to essentially show which ones are active or not, you can always have list views within the user, so say the user in setup. So you can either have like active, just active equals true and shows all users by that. You can have it by role, by division, those kinds of things, just to make things a little bit more easy to see which ones are active. You can also make a report with the same kind of thing. It's called a user report, and just put in the specific filters. They only show active and only show from this department, that kind of thing.
All right.
And I was going to say, this is Virginia. Also, what we do is when we inactivate a user, not only do we inactivate them, but we modify their username and we pre-pinned it with 2 underscores. So any usernames that have 2 underscores, that just automatically tells you they're an inactive user.
I don't understand why. It's just, most of the time with usernames, I would recommend not touching them whatsoever. And this is just coming from a horror story on Steve Mo's side, that somebody changed the username to themselves from somebody else's user, and it screwed up all the data. So,
if I can make a suggestion, we actually put private sharing on users and then share active users with everybody, and inactives become effectively hidden from everyone with the admin.
That's a good idea. The other thing that you want to be careful about if you're changing usernames is what type of, or if any, legalities that you need to consider. Depending on the type of organization you're with and the type of data that you're working with, you want to make sure that you can trace those actions by your users back to who actually did them and the time frame in which they did them, in case there's ever any kind of need for proof, an employee lawsuit or anything like that. Right.
So what is the, just for my context, what's the added value of changing the username if they're already deactivated?
Just sort of like what she was saying is that if you're doing a global search and everything gets searched, you can, it's at least an easy way to visually see that they're inactive, not part of the company. Now, if these are people who come back and go and come back, I wouldn't recommend that. But if these are people who are gone, they're never going to come back, you're never going to use that account ever again, then we've been able to do that pretty successfully. But yes, you're right. Creating a list view of users and marking the ones that, creating a list view for active and inactive is also a great way to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Good questions. All right, if we don't have any other questions or any other discussions, Brendan, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we say goodbye?
I would just say that, let's say hypothetically you failed the first exam. I've failed one of them so far. Long story on that one. But if you happen to fail one of the exams, just try to figure out what aspects, what topics you're having the most trouble with. So just try to remember those questions where it's just kind of like, I'm not quite sure about how this would work in a private model. Maybe I should go into my dev org and play with this a little bit. So don't necessarily become discouraged by it, and just take it sort of as a learning experience.
Good point. And don't let that discourage you, because not everybody passes the first time. So definitely don't let that discourage you. Brendan, thank you so much for imparting your knowledge, your wisdom, and taking the time to share the information with us. Brian, thank you for letting me put you on the spot. I appreciate that. And mark your calendars for January 20th. Mois will be with us. He's actually a returning special guest who has a lot of background in, first of all, he's got 18 certifications, which blows my mind. He's also an MVP. He's presented at Dreamforce, and his expertise is in Lightning Components and Apex and Visualforce, and a lot of the developer world. So if it's something that you're trying to break into, want to figure out how do you get started, or if you're already dabbling in it or an advanced user but something's got you stumped or you want to bounce some ideas off of him, he will be with us on January 20th. So mark your calendar, and hope that you're following us on Twitter as well for updates and announcements. If there is ever a topic that you would like us to make sure that we get on the docket and see if we can't get an expert to join us for that, please let us know. We're open to ideas and suggestions. We appreciate everybody joining us today. Thank you, Dale, for being my sidekick. I really appreciate it. And with that, let's give you back 5 minutes in your Friday. Everybody have a safe weekend for those of us who are getting snow. And everybody take care. It was great to hear everybody's voices and hear your questions. So everyone take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.